diving into a cybersecurity scam that preys on our human desire for connection and love, romance scams. In today's episode, I sit down with Kerry Tomlinson, an incredible Emmy-awarded broadcaster who specializes in investigative journalism. Kerry went undercover as a victim to expose the manipulative methods and secrets romance scammers use. Like me, you might have thought scammers of this type target older people who may lack knowledge of dating platforms. But as we'll learn, they prey on anyone looking for connection online. I'm your host, Alice Violet. Remember to subscribe and check out the screenshots we're sharing on Instagram and LinkedIn alongside this series.
I think you might be right. I'm thinking maybe I'm way past the point of no return.
Hello, Kerry. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello. I am so glad to be here.
So you actually have a really interesting approach, which is that you like to go kind of undercover to learn about some of the stories that you're covering. How was it that you decided to go undercover as a victim, and how do you do that?
I am, and I'm sure many other people are, bombarded with messages from romance scammers. They come through all forms of social media. They're on LinkedIn, they're on Instagram, they're on Mastodon, they're on Twitter, now X. They're on Words with Friends, of course, on Facebook. And there are many different tactics they use. Usually they will just message you. Lately, they've been doing something where they put comments on your post that say, hey, I like the kinds of things that you post. You seem really nice. I would love to connect with you. And then you make the choice to connect with them. So they're tricking you into that first step. But there are so many opportunities out there. In this particular one, where I went undercover for 4 months, which was a huge amount of work, as you'll hear as we go on. But the reason that this particular one triggered me to do this is because he was using pictures of a singer, a well-known singer. And because of that, I recognized the pictures and I thought, this guy is so brazen that he is taking pictures of famous people and using them. I mean, how brazen is that? This guy is just willing to just destroy people with pictures that are readily identifiable.
So he wasn't trying to pretend to be the celebrity. He was just using the pictures.
He was pretending to be a singer in the pictures with a different name.
Right. Wow. So he adds you on a social media platform and you just start chatting.
Right. So, and then we get into just right away the tactics that they use. And the tactics are, one of the first things they do is they compliment you because they want you to feel like you owe them something. Because when someone compliments you, you often feel like, wow, that is really nice. I should do something nice for them. So then you continue the conversation. That is scam tactic number 1 when it comes to all of this. And then they get into personal things. And first they tell you a story about how they're going through some difficulty. And we all want to help people. We all want to listen. And then they ask you personal questions about relationships. Because once you start chatting on that level, it's creating an intimacy, in this case, a fake intimacy, but you, the victim, feel like you have intimacy with this person. And pretty quickly, they get into this pretty quickly.
So you recognize straight away, this guy is not real because he's using pictures of a celebrity and he's using really obvious tactics that I've covered in the stories that I know.
And also, in general, people don't just message you out of the blue and tell you that you have a beautiful smile, for example. Or if they do, in general, you're just not going to respond to that. Maybe that's from 30 years of TV news. But for me, if a stranger messages me and says, hey, you're so beautiful, I'd like to connect, I don't believe them. I believe that they have another agenda. Now, there are plenty of nice people out there who like to connect, especially if you work in TV news. So I'm not saying I don't connect with people, but when it starts to get to that level of compliments upon compliments, that's when you know there's something else going on that you don't want to be a part of, even if it's innocent on their part. And then, of course, if you're single, which I'm not, but if you are, maybe over a long term, you might develop something with someone. But it's when it's so quickly and it's so heavily compliment upon compliment off the top of the relationship, that's when you're saying, hey, this isn't normal.
Mm. And I remember when we first chatted and you said that you'd gone undercover, and I assumed that you would have set up a dating profile and you would have kind of positioned yourself as somebody who they would think was vulnerable. But actually, you didn't, because that would have kind of maybe been obvious to them. You just let them come to you, which I thought was really interesting.
They will come to you. I mean, I cannot possibly keep up and do enough undercover investigations on all the scammers, the romance scammers who pass through my view on a regular basis. I would love to. For example, the other day, I saw someone using pictures of a well known singer from Ukraine and Russia. And I know this because I study Russian and Ukrainian, and I study that part of the world and I study those languages. So I'm very familiar. He simply, or these scammers, sometimes it's a group of scammers, they simply stole the pictures of this well known singer from that part of the world. And they were presuming that people in the United States wouldn't know this singer.
Mm.
So things like that, there are just so many of these kinds of things. I want to investigate them, but I don't possibly have time. Hopefully, the investigation I've done, and of course I'll do more in the future, but hopefully the investigation that I've done will allow people to really get a good look at some of the tactics so that these scammers will ultimately find that they can't get money from people and they will have to hopefully leave us all alone.
So you were talking to this scammer for 4 months. So when did they start asking you for money?
So that's a great question. I was waiting, 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 waiting. And I remember
Mm.
the moment when they asked me for money, I said, yay, finally, the scam. Because it takes so much work. The scammers want to become your confidant. They have all the time in the world. Their full-time job is to sit online with you and multiple other people, male, female, old, young, what have you, and chat with many people at once. They have pretty much standard scripts and things that they follow in general for this kind of thing. And they use that time to bombard you. And the questions are questions designed to make you feel like you have a companion. And that is, how are you doing today? Have you eaten today? You should eat something. What have you had to eat? How are you feeling right now? They will ask about children, pets, friends, family members, because they want to have someone to ask about. So, for example, with your cat, Vivian, they would say, oh, how is Vivian doing? Is Vivian okay? They will ask things like that, and that is something close to you, and it makes you feel like, once again, you have that special connection. So this kind of undercover investigation is a huge amount of work. You have to constantly talk to this person, and you do it through chat. They like to often do it through Google Chat, but there are various other ways that they'll do it. In this particular case, it's easy for them to line up a bunch of people on Google Chat, but of course, it's not the only way they do it. You have to do it constantly. It's annoying. So to carve out a massive amount of time to do this was really quite trying. Of course, in the end, it's worth it because we expose this, we show people, and then someone will see this. And when it happens to them, they will say, no, I saw that. And then they won't have their lives ruined by this.
Now that you're saying that we get these messages all the time, I'm going to be more mindful and actually kind of respond to a couple of them. But I wouldn't know whether I'm just chatting to someone who's pretending to be famous because they're just lonely online. And, if it was for 4 months, I'd be thinking, are you going to ask me for money so I can see that I am actually talking to a scammer, or am I just talking to some lonely person who's pretending to be a celebrity?
Well, I would say going undercover as a victim is not without its risks and dangers. So I personally cannot advise it. I really can't.
Okay.
Because there are risks. For example, when I've gone undercover over the years, many things have happened to me. I've been threatened with
Mm.
death threats.
Oh, my
I have
goodness.
I have people who I've exposed who to this day, years and years later, still hold a grudge and let you know it. They will also do things like they will take your phone number and they will put it in an ad online saying, I'm giving away a free washer and dryer. They're almost brand new.
Mm.
Please contact me. And then you will get phone call after phone call after phone call from people who want this free thing. Harassment. In this case, with this scammer, The scammer reported my Google Chat account, so my Gmail account, and said that I was a scammer. And Google shut down my account, which had all of the great information in it about the scam. So I explained to Google that this person was the scammer, not me. And ultimately, Google chose to give me my account back so I could have all that great information. I did have some of it saved, but not the final conversation, the very, very, very final conversation, because right after the very final conversation, he reported it as a scam. So that's just the tip of the iceberg of things that can happen to you if you do this kind of thing. I cannot recommend it. I've been doing it for decades, and I still have to choose carefully about which kinds of things I go undercover to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because yeah, you wouldn't want to put your actual life in danger if you are talking to somebody and they've come through your real social media profile. You'd almost have to do it where you also set up a fake social media profile, and that's obviously a hell of a lot more effort and time and work based on what you're trying to get out of it. So talk me through the scammer then. So you're chatting for 4 months, you're putting a huge amount of time into it, you're thinking, come on, Jesus, ask me for some money. What actually happened? What was the lie they told?
Oh, I was so excited. I was at the airport, I think it was in Denver, and I was sitting there chatting because you have to chat constantly. And finally, the scammer said, and I'll call him a he, it's generally a group of individuals, but the scammer said, I am working on an oil rig in the North Sea, and I am on a contract and I can't go home for a year, which is a big lie. So that was the premise along all of it, is that he was an oil rig worker. He was an engineer. He had grown up in Texas, and he wanted to come see me. We were in love. He wants to marry me, all that good stuff, but he can't leave because he's on contract. And he really wants us to be a family. I, in my story, told him that I had a 13-year-old son. He told me he had a son of a similar age. Our families were going to be united. And when he felt that I sufficiently had this desire to have our families united, then he says, I can get leave, but you have to apply for it. So when he says that, that applying for it is going to involve money. And I remember just saying out loud, expressing out loud how excited I was that finally, I think it took him 3.5 to 4 weeks to actually do this. So that's a lot of work. So yay, he finally does it. So I have to apply. I send in an application, which is supposed to include your real government issued ID.
Oh,
So that's another risk, is you need to provide them with some sort of
oh
identification
dear.
for them to be able to believe you. Now, of course, I didn't give them my government ID. I made my own government ID. It's not a counterfeit because it's for a made up place that doesn't exist, but they don't know that because they are not living in the United States. So I made an ID for a made up place with my picture on it, slightly changed so that it is not 100% my picture. And I turned it in, and they said, okay, you're approved. I had to write a letter saying how much we needed to be together to make this work. And by the way, none of this is real for oil rigs. You don't have to do any of this for real life
So
oil
did
rigs.
they send you some kind of had they got like some kind of platform that you had to log into to do this?
No, at this point they didn't. They sent me to another person who was the same person, actually, but I had
Yeah.
to email a representative of the company he supposedly worked for, which was supposedly ExxonMobil, but then the company name changed slightly. Things were just slightly different. So I have to email this person, and this person also contacted me through text messages, who was a representative of the company. I needed to apply. I needed to send my letter. I needed to send my government ID, my address, and all that good stuff. And then they were going to decide if I would be approved for this family leave letter, which would allow the loved one to come home and we could finally be together.
Was that how did that conversation go in terms of like, what should I put in my letter? Did he guide what you should write?
That's a great question and a great point. He simply sent me a copy of the letter and said, turn
Oh.
this in. So no effort for the victim, because it would be stressful for the victim to think, I am writing a letter to a big corporation to request family leave for someone, and we're not even married yet, and I'm requesting family leave. That would be very stressful. And in that case, they want low stress for you. So they simply wrote the letter and sent it and said, turn this in. And then they were very good at following up and saying things like, send me a copy of the email that you sent with your application letter. Send me a copy of what the representative told you. What did the representative say? However, at one point, the scammer slipped up. So he was texting me as two different people, as the scammer and then as the representative of the company. And at one point, he messed up and he texted me on the wrong channel saying he was the representative of the company, right? It was on the
Oh
wrong
my
text message chain.
gosh.
Right. It was hilarious. It was a laugh out loud moment for sure.
So did you have to pretend you hadn't seen that?
Yes, I did. But I remember I was in Washington, D.C. for a story at that point, and I was at dinner when he did that. And it was one of things where you sort of whoop and holler, and then the other diners look at you like, what are you going on? And you're just like, oh, scammers did something dumb. You can't really explain it without all of this detail about
Yes.
what's happening.
Wow. And also, it's good that you got that kind of affirmation that this was actually a scammer, because all this time I would have been in the back of my mind thinking, oh my God, what if I am chatting to a lonely guy on an oil rig, and even though he's not the guy in the photo, he just wants to get away from work, and I'm going to have this guy turn up at my house, and I thought I was doing a romance scam.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, hopefully one of the most important things to learn is that you always vet every single person that you have any kind of relationship online. And I don't mean like a chat on LinkedIn. I mean when you're actually getting invested into something. That's when you really need to check. And we will talk about some ways, some things
Yes.
that you can do to help with
Yes.
that. Would you be surprised to know that I got approved?
Mm,
It's shocking, isn't it? Yes, I got
wow.
approved. And of course, that's when the money finally is requested. Yay! About $2,000 to be able to pay for the permit for him to get the family leave so that he could come home.
So I guess he's done a really clever thing there, because they've made you jump through a load of hoops. So you're thinking, yay, I'm finally getting this guy. I've had to declare that I'm in love with him. I'm already thinking about the fact our families are going to be together, and kids are going to meet, and we're talking about all of this stuff. And then I have to pay, and I think, oh, go on then, because we finally got where we're going.
It's a lot of money and you don't want to lose $2,000. But in
Yeah.
comparison to some of the big scams we have heard about where people lose $500,000, $1 million, this kind of thing happens. So in comparison to that, 2000 is a lot less. And it's a test to see if you will pay the money, because that will be the beginning of things. Unfortunately for the investigation, that was the beginning of a very thorny issue, because I'm not going to pay the scammers money. So you realize at 3 to 4 weeks in, somehow I have to keep stalling these people and not paying for as long as possible so I can get as much information from them as possible. So that meant 3 months of stalling. Scammers get very angry when you stall them and you don't pay them the money. So at various points, he became quite belligerent with me because I was having various reasons for not paying. And it actually became very entertaining. And what is the excuse I'm going to come up with now? What kind of creation am I going to make a setup so that it would be at least somewhat believable that I am not paying this person?
And what were your reasons?
Oh my goodness, I came up with so many good ones. The way they wanted me to pay was through an app, a payment app. And the one they wanted to use is called Barter, which is used not in the United States so much, but it is used in some other countries. And they asked me to send the payment to the name of a woman who was not in any way affiliated with the company. So I started questioning, why am I sending it to this person? Why am I not sending it to the representative of the company? And that takes a long time to do. And then my favorite part was I said I was at work and that a friend of mine who works with me didn't like the idea of using the app because it wasn't an official way to pay. So then we introduce the third party, the fake third party. It was just me being my friend. We introduce another party to this, and that allows a lot of delays because the friend is uncertain. The friend is going to check on things. The friend is doing this. The friend is doing that. The scammer gets very angry. The scammer calls me and yells at me and tells me horrible things. And what's really sad about this, for me, it was entertaining, but what is very sad is it's clear that in real scams, the scammers will abuse their victims and bully their victims and try to make them feel bad about themselves. So not only are you in a fake relationship, but you're in an abusive fake relationship that will have real impacts on you. The relationship itself is fake, but the abuse is real. And this is
Wow.
actually horrible for people. This is
It's
terrible.
interesting to know that they would be aggressive with you, because I would have assumed that they would have been kind of like stressed, or some big thing had happened at work, or it was making them look bad and they were trying to kind of emotionally blackmail you. But to actually be outright aggressive and disappointed, I am surprised to learn that they do that.
Yes, because they have control over you. Once they know that you have an established belief that your relationship is real, then they have control. And they're very good at reading emotions. So if I had expressed at some moment that, well, you can't do this to me, I'm not going to talk to you, then they would have changed their tactics.
Right.
But I wanted to be a more typical victim. I wanted to be someone who believed that I had a relationship and that was a nice person. And what experts will tell you is they often look for nice people to be their victims because they know they can manipulate nice people a little bit more, not in every case, but it is more typical. So I wanted to be that nice victim and say, I'm so sorry. I don't
Mm.
understand. I'm trying to help. I want us to be together. I'm trying to do the right thing. But my friend is telling me that this isn't a good idea because it's not an official app for the company. So we went down that path for quite some time.
I'm just so curious on how this unraveled. So you're stalling, you're saying, I can't send the money. He's getting aggressive and frustrated.
Oh, at that point, my friend at work said I shouldn't use the app at all. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to create a situation where he would have to give me some further information, more detail that would actually allow us to do some sort of action against him. I mean, you're not going to be able to necessarily track down these scammers. I have another full-time job. I just don't have the time to actually, I mean, I sleep 4 hours a night as it is. Well, now I'm going to sleep 2
Whoa.
hours per night and go after this guy, or 0 hours per night, right? So you just have to be happy with exposing their tactics and knowing that you are helping people. So that said, what I came up with, I mean, my friend at work came up with, is that instead of using this app, that he should give me information to wire the money, that I would wire the money through the bank, because that way he would have to provide a bank account and a name for the account. Then I could contact the bank and law enforcement and say, okay, here's an account that's being used for fraud. It's possible that the person whose name is on it is a victim, because they often do that. They will use their victims to transfer money, or it could be someone who knowingly is doing this and is part of the scheme. And either way, we need to shut that down, either get that person help or get them to stop being a part of this scheme. So then he has to get me the bank information. And I immediately contact the bank and law enforcement and get things going. So then I came up with this whole thing with the bank. So I have to go to the bank. I have to talk to the people at the bank. The people at the bank say, we need to verify this. So then I tell the scammer, well, we have to verify this. And in fact, the bank is going to call you. The bank said, we are going to call you to verify this. So you have that whole delay that can last a long time. You can go through that. Maybe the bank is trying to reach you. And then ultimately, I had a friend with a male voice call. They didn't say they were the bank manager. They just said, I'm calling to verify a wire transfer. So not impersonating the bank, just saying I'm calling to verify a wire transfer. And that took a whole period of time of trying to verify the wire transfer. And then ultimately we say the wire transfer doesn't go through. And then we have to try a whole series of different bank accounts so that I was able to gather, I believe, 6 different bank accounts that were being used by this organization and turn them in, right? You turn them in. Unfortunately, the bank and law enforcement aren't going to tell you the details of what is happening. We do know that at least some of those people were victims. And it's possible that some of them were also part of the scheme, but you're not going to know that. So you just have to be satisfied knowing that you are destroying some of the infrastructure of this scheme. So the best part, this is the best, because this is going on, and he is getting angrier and angrier. This was happening when COVID was more of a threat. So I came down supposedly with COVID. Sent him a picture of the test. I have COVID. That means I can't go to the bank because at that point you had to stay indoors if you had COVID. So I couldn't go to the bank. So that introduced a long period of time where he's getting angry, of course, at various moments, but he is also alternating that with sweet things because, of course, he doesn't want to lose the victim. So then, then I told him I was having trouble breathing. And he said, you need to go to the hospital. And I said, that's a good idea. I am going to the hospital. I will be unavailable for a while. And you will have to chat with my son. Because at that point, we'd had a phone call with a volunteer who was pretending to be my son and this guy, which was hilarious what came out of that. But in any case, that provided—
my goodness, give me some highlights. I want it. So I'd love some examples of like what he was saying when he was aggressive and what he was saying when he was nice and the conversation he had with your son.
Oh my goodness, so many things. So what they do, they simply grab love lines from various sites online. So there are sites like 50 beautiful romance messages for him or 50 lovely romance poems for her. And you look them up and they just simply grab them straight from the site and they plop them into the chat, and they can do it to multiple people at once. And some of them were quite hilarious. In the video, I talk about one where he said that you smell delightful or something like that. And how that's just bizarre. That's a strange thing to say to someone who you've never met in person and that you couldn't possibly smell over the internet. But they're just grabbing it. And what you can do, and this is one of the tricks, you can take some of their messages and do a search on the internet and see if it pops up. And many times they will just take it word for word from these sites. And some of these sites are a little bit scammy, so be careful. It's clear that some of these sites are not on the up and up. In any case, they just grab them and they put them in. So at any moment, they have hundreds of love messages to choose from. So if he sensed at any point that I was frustrated or anything like that he was going over the top with his angry demands for money, he would just plop in one of those love messages. Another thing they do in the messages to entice you, they put in a lot of GIFs or GIFs, depending on how you want to say it, of flowers and hearts and things like that. They will also send you links to YouTube videos that are music videos and they're love videos. And one thing that they like to do is they like to send ones that talk about marriage. So there are some songs out there that, like, I Think I Want to Marry You by Bruno Mars, for example. So they'll send you that. So without saying, I want to marry you, although they're certainly glad to say that, also they serenade you with this music on a regular basis.
I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you.
So You listen to the music and you think, oh, I feel love. This is another expression of love from this person. And it makes it more real because it's more visceral. The love music is more visceral. So he does things like that to sustain all the way through as we're going through this journey. As I go to the hospital, as I come back, I'm back at home, but I am recovering. It was very difficult. I was on a ventilator. It was just a difficult time. I cannot go to the bank.
And I suppose that's a really good from your side, because it's almost awkward for him to keep bringing up the $2,000.
Right. Although he did not worry about being pushy.
Okay.
And as I have spoken to people who they're not part of the scam, but they may know the process, and they say these people, some of them are desperate, and some of them, this is their job. And so they are pushing because they want to make money for their job. So he was not in any way shy to ask about the money. He just interspersed it with a lot of fake love messages that he grabbed from the internet.
Wow, we learned lots in this episode, and I'm sure you did too. We're releasing part 2 of this episode next week, where Kerry shares a powerful phone call and conversations the scammer had with her fictional 13-year-old son. Plus, we have the recording of what happened when she finally confronted him. Thanks for listening to our mini-series exposing the secrets used by romance scammers. If you or someone you know has been impacted, please don't feel ashamed. These are highly manipulative scams. You can find advice on Citizens Advice, Action Fraud and Crime Stoppers. We'll add the links to these in the episode description. Please do be careful though, as sadly scammers also prey on victims, claiming they'll help you recover your losses if you pay even more money. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and check out our LinkedIn and Instagram accounts for screenshots of the conversations Kerry had with the scammer. It's Alice Violet Creative, or my LinkedIn is just Alice Violet. Thanks for listening, guys.
What he wants to do is make you think you're going to have a family. And what I did is I brought the voice of a 13-year-old in. I had a volunteer serve as the son, and we had a phone call. And once the scammer heard that there was a real voice of a real teenager, then they suddenly used a tactic that is very common, and that is